The afternoon sun blazed over the Rodriguez family's backyard in suburban Minneapolis, where the smell of grilled burgers mixed with children's laughter. It was the 4th of July, 2019, and Maria Rodriguez had invited 20 neighbors for their annual summer barbecue. Her daughter, 3-year-old Emma, wore a red sundress with white stars, her dark curls bouncing as she chased butterflies near the flower garden. "She's getting so big," Maria's sister commented, watching Emma giggle at a butterfly that landed on her finger. "I can barely keep up with her anymore," Maria laughed, flipping burgers on the grill while her husband David organized a water balloon fight for the older kids. At 3:47 p.m., Maria turned to call Emma for a snack. The butterfly garden was empty. "Emma?" she called, scanning the yard. No answer. "Emma, honey, where are you?" The first flutter of panic hit her chest. She walked quickly around the side of the house, checking the front yard. Nothing. "David!" Her voice cracked. "Where's Emma?" David's face drained of color. Within seconds, every adult at the party was searching. They checked inside the house, every closet, under every bed, behind every door. The basement, the garage, the neighbors' yards. Someone noticed the back gate was open, swinging slightly in the breeze. "I closed that," David said, his voice hollow. "I know I closed that gate." By 4:15 p.m., Maria was on the phone with 911, her hands shaking so violently she could barely hold the phone. "My daughter is missing. She's 3 years old. She was just here." Her voice dissolved into sobs. Police arrived within 8 minutes. Officer Marcus Thompson, a canine handler with 15 years on the force, pulled up with his German Shepherd, Justice, a 5-year-old dog with intense brown eyes and a reputation as one of the best tracking dogs in the state. Detective Sarah Chun, a sharp-eyed investigator known for her work on child cases, took immediate command of the scene. "I need everyone to stay calm," Detective Chun announced to the crowd. "I need Emma's parents here. Everyone else, please step back. We're going to find her." Officer Thompson brought Justice to Emma's bedroom, letting him sniff her favorite stuffed bunny, a worn pink rabbit named Mr. Hoppy that Emma never slept without. The dog's tail went rigid, his nose working the air with laser focus. He immediately pulled toward the backyard, straining at his leash with purpose. The trail led to the back gate, down the sidewalk for nearly 2 blocks, and then nothing. Justice circled frantically, whined, and sat down in defeat. The scent had completely vanished. "Vehicle," Thompson said grimly to Detective Chun. "Someone put her in a car right here." As twilight fell, the neighborhood transformed into a command center. News vans with satellite dishes lined the street. The FBI was contacted immediately. Volunteers spread out in organized search parties, calling Emma's name through the darkening streets while holding flashlights and her photograph. Maria sat on her front steps, wrapped in a blanket despite the oppressive summer heat, staring at nothing while tears streamed silently down her face. David paced like a caged animal, his phone pressed to his ear as he frantically called everyone they knew. Desperately hoping someone had seen something, Detective Chun pulled up security camera footage from 3 neighboring houses. At 3:52 p.m., exactly 5 minutes after Maria last saw Emma playing in the garden, a dark blue sedan had driven slowly past the Rodriguez house. The driver's face was obscured by a baseball cap pulled low, but Chun could see him looking intently toward the backyard. 3 minutes later, the same car passed again, this time driving away much faster. The license plate was completely covered with mud deliberately. Chun was certain by midnight, Emma had been missing for over 8 hours. The Amber Alert blared across every phone in Minnesota with an urgent ping. Her face, those bright brown eyes, that gap-toothed smile, those wild curls appeared on every news channel and social media platform. Maria couldn't stop sobbing, her body shaking with each breath. David punched the wall in frustration and anguish, leaving a hole in the drywall and blood on his bruised knuckles. Detective Chun stood alone in Emma's pink bedroom, looking at the scattered toys, the tiny shoes by the door, the crayon drawing of a family with "I love Mommy and Daddy" scrawled across the top. She'd worked dozens of missing children cases in her 12-year career. She knew the grim statistics intimately. After 24 hours, the chances of finding a child alive dropped dramatically. After 72 hours, hope became a cruel illusion. She clenched her jaw until it ached. Not this time. Not this little girl. Not on her watch. Officer Thompson sat in his patrol car with Justice's head resting heavily on his lap. The dog seemed to understand the gravity of their failure to track Emma. "We'll find her, boy," Thompson whispered, scratching behind the shepherd's ears. "We have to find her." As the first night without Emma crept toward a gray dawn, the Rodriguez house remained ablaze with lights in every window. Maria absolutely refused to sleep, her eyes red and swollen. What if she comes home and thinks we forgot about her? She whispered hoarsely. What if she's out there scared and cold, calling for us in the dark? David held her trembling body, both of them breaking apart in ways they never imagined possible. Their perfect, ordinary life had completely shattered in just 5 minutes. Every parent's worst nightmare had become their horrifying reality. Outside, Detective Chun coordinated with FBI agents who were setting up sophisticated tracking equipment and databases. They'd interview every registered sex offender within a 50-mile radius by morning. They'd comb through every aspect of the Rodriguez family's life, looking for anyone with a grudge, anyone with unusual access, anyone who'd paid too much attention to Emma at the grocery store or the park. Media quickly dubbed it the 4th of July disappearance. Cable news ran constant, coverage with Emma's photo permanently displayed in the corner. Social media exploded with theories, tips, prayers, and unfortunately, cruel hoaxes from attention-seekers. But somewhere out there in the darkness, Emma was alive or dead, scared or hurt, crying for her parents or silent forever. Detective Chun looked at Emma's kindergarten photo, now taped to her dashboard. Those innocent eyes stared back at her with complete trust in the world. "Hold on, sweetheart," Chun whispered into the empty car. "We're coming for you. Just hold on." Dawn broke over Minneapolis with cruel indifference. While the world woke up to coffee and morning routines, the Rodriguez family hadn't slept a single minute. Maria sat at the kitchen table, staring blankly at Emma's empty chair with the Little Mermaid booster seat still pulled up to the table. David was on the phone with the FBI for the 4th time, his voice hoarse and cracking from repeating the same information over and over. Detective Sarah Chun arrived at 6 a.m. sharp with 2 large coffees and a grim expression etched on her exhausted face. She'd been up all night reviewing footage, running extensive background checks, and coordinating with multiple agencies across 3 states. The first 72 hours in a child abduction case were absolutely critical statistics, showed that if a child wasn't found within that narrow window, the chances of recovery alive dropped to less than 25%. They were now 14 hours in, and the clock was ticking mercilessly. "We have something," Chun said, spreading grainy photos across the kitchen table. "The blue sedan from the security footage. We tracked it through traffic cameras heading west on Highway 55. Then we lost it completely near the Ridgedale shopping district." Officer Marcus Thompson arrived with justice, the German shepherd immediately going to Maria and pressing his massive head gently against her leg, a gesture of comfort he'd been specifically trained for with trauma victims. Thompson had dark circles under his bloodshot eyes, but his jaw was set with fierce determination. "Justice and I are heading to that shopping district right now," Thompson said firmly. If Emma's scent is anywhere in that area, he'll find it. This dog has never failed me. The FBI had transformed the Rodriguez living room into a makeshift command center overnight. Agent Victoria Reeves, a specialist in child abduction cases with an impressive 70% recovery rate, took charge of the entire operation. She was a woman in her 50s with steel-gray hair pulled back tightly and eyes that had seen too much darkness but never lost their intensity or hope. Mr. and Mrs. Rodriguez, Agent Reeves said gently but firmly, sitting across from them. I need you to think very carefully. Has anyone shown unusual interest in Emma recently? A neighbor who asked too many questions? Someone at her daycare? Anyone who made you uncomfortable, even slightly? Maria's mind raced frantically through recent weeks. There was a man, she said suddenly, sitting up straighter. At the park 2 weeks ago. He kept watching Emma on the swings. I thought I was being paranoid, but David noticed too. He had a camera, David added, his eyes widening with realization. Said he was a photography student practicing, but he only took pictures in Emma's direction. Chun's pen flew across her notepad. Description? Tall, maybe 6 feet. Thin build. Brown hair, patchy beard. Late 30s, early 40s, David said, the details flooding back. He had a blue baseball cap. The same cap from the security footage, Chun said, her pulse quickening. This was their first real lead. Meanwhile, at the Ridgedale Shopping Center, Officer Thompson walked Justice through the massive parking lot. The dog's nose worked overtime, zigzagging between cars. Suddenly, near a dumpster behind a Target store, Justice sat down and barked his alert signal. Thompson's heart raced as he examined the area. There, caught on the dumpster's metal edge, was a small piece of red fabric with white stars. Chun, get over here now. Thompson radioed. We've got something. Within 20 minutes, the parking lot was swarming with investigators. The fabric matched Emma's dress perfectly. Security cameras from the Target showed the blue sedan parked in that exact spot at 4:17 p.m. the previous day, just 30 minutes after Emma's disappearance. A man in a baseball cap had exited the vehicle, looked around nervously, then gotten back in and driven away quickly. Run facial recognition, Agent Reeves commanded. I want to know who this man is within the hour. Back at the Rodriguez house, Maria clutched the photo of the fabric scrap that Chun had sent to her phone. It was Emma's dress. Her baby had been here. She's alive, Maria whispered desperately. She has to be alive. We're getting closer, Chun assured her, though her own stomach was twisted with anxiety. Finding the fabric was good. It meant Emma had been in that location. But it also meant whoever took her was smart enough to change her clothes, to eliminate evidence. This wasn't some impulsive act. This was planned by noon. Facial recognition came back with a hit. Robert Sullivan, 42 years old, lived in a small apartment in downtown Minneapolis. No prior criminal record, but recent financial troubles had emerged. He'd been fired from his job as a school custodian 3 months ago, after parents complained about him being too friendly with children. His ex-wife had filed a restraining order, claiming he had an unhealthy obsession with young girls. That's our guy, Agent Reeves said coldly. Find him, now. But when a SWAT team raided Sullivan's apartment at 2 p.m., it was empty. Abandoned. The landlord said Sullivan hadn't been seen in 3 days. On his kitchen table, investigators found something that made everyone's blood run cold. A hand-drawn map with multiple parks circled in red ink, including the park where Emma played. And photographs. Dozens of photographs of children, with Emma's face circled over and over. He's been planning this for months, Chun said, her voice shaking with rage. This wasn't random. Agent Reeves immediately issued a federal warrant and upgraded the case to an interstate manhunt. Sullivan's photo blasted across every news network. His face ordinary, forgettable. The kind of man you'd pass on the street without a second glance, became the most wanted in America. Sullivan's ex-wife was brought in for questioning. She was hysterical, crying and shaking. "I tried to warn people," she sobbed. "I told the police he was dangerous. He has this cabin, his uncle's old hunting cabin in northern Wisconsin. He used to talk about taking girls there, keeping them safe from the corrupt world. I thought he was just talking crazy." "Where?" Chun demanded. "Where is this cabin?" "Near Hayward." "I don't remember the exact address." "Somewhere in the woods off Highway 77. Please, you have to find that little girl. He's sick." "He's really sick." Within minutes, Wisconsin State Police were mobilized. Helicopters with thermal imaging cameras took to the skies. Officer Thompson and Justice were loaded into a police helicopter heading north. Every second counted now. They were 36 hours into Emma's disappearance. The 72-hour window was closing fast, and somewhere in the Wisconsin wilderness, a 3-year-old girl was alone with a monster. At 3 a.m. on the third day of Emma's disappearance, Detective Sarah Chun's phone rang with the call she'd been desperately waiting for. A truck driver named Harold Mitchell, hauling freight from Minnesota to Illinois, had just seen the news coverage at a rest stop. His voice was shaking as he spoke. "I saw her," Mitchell said urgently. 2 days ago, at the Clearwater Rest Area off I-94 in Wisconsin. There was this little girl with dark curly hair, wearing different clothes than in the photo, but I remember her face. She looked scared, real scared. The man with her was acting weird, kept pulling her away when she tried to talk to other people." Chun's heart hammered in her chest. "What time was this?" "Around 6 p.m. I didn't think nothing of it then, but when I saw her picture on the news just now." "That's the same little girl." "I'm sure of it." "Mr. Mitchell, you may have just saved her life," Chun said, already signaling to Agent Reeves. "Stay on the line." Within minutes, Wisconsin State Police were reviewing security footage from the Clearwater Rest Area. And there she was, Emma Rodriguez, wearing a green T-shirt and jeans that were too big for her tiny frame, holding the hand of a tall, thin man in a blue baseball cap. Robert Sullivan. The timestamp read 6:14 p.m. on July 5th, just 27 hours after Emma's abduction. "Enhance that," Agent Reeves commanded, pointing at the screen. The tech zoomed in on Sullivan's vehicle in the parking lot, the same blue sedan, but now they had something even better. A partial license plate, WIS847. Run every registration in Wisconsin with those numbers. Reeves ordered. Cross-reference with Robert Sullivan's known associates, family members, anyone connected to him. Officer Thompson studied the footage intensely, Justice sitting alert beside him. "Look at her body language," Thompson said, pointing. "She's trying to pull away from him. She's looking at other people, trying to get attention. This girl is fighting." Maria Rodriguez watched the footage with tears streaming down her face. But for the first time in 60 hours, they were tears of relief mixed with fear. "She's alive," Maria whispered, clutching David's hand so tightly her knuckles turned white. "Our baby is alive." A database search came back with 14 possible vehicle matches. Chun's team started calling every registered owner, working down the list with military precision. The 11th call hit gold a woman named Patricia Sullivan, Robert's aunt who died 6 months earlier. The vehicle registration hadn't been transferred. More importantly, Patricia had owned property. She had a hunting cabin, the local Wisconsin sheriff confirmed over the phone, up near Hayward, real remote area. The family used it for deer season. "I can have the exact coordinates to you in 5 minutes." Those 5 minutes felt like 5 hours. When the coordinates finally came through, Agent Reeves mobilized everything they had. Wisconsin State Police SWAT teams, FBI tactical units, local sheriff's deputies, and Officer Thompson with Justice were all converging on a single point in the dense Wisconsin wilderness, a small cabin at the end of a forgotten logging road. Surrounded by miles of forest, the Rodriguez family was told to stay behind. But there was no force on earth that could have stopped them from getting in their car and driving toward Wisconsin. Chun didn't have the heart to order them back. She understood if it were her child, she'd walk through fire to get their dot. As dawn broke on July 8th, tactical teams surrounded the cabin in complete silence. Through thermal imaging, they confirmed 2 heat signatures inside one adult, one small child. Sullivan's blue sedan was parked behind the cabin, partially hidden under branches. He'd tried to conceal it, but not well enough. Agent Reeves took command from a mobile unit parked a quarter-mile away. "We go in quiet," she said into her radio. "This man is desperate and unpredictable. The child's safety is the only priority. I want snipers in position, negotiators ready, and medical teams standing by." Officer Thompson and Justice waited at the perimeter, the dog sensing the tension and standing rigid, ears forward. Thompson had his hand on Justice's collar, ready to move the second he got the order. At 6:47 a.m., a SWAT team member radioed in. "We have visual through the window. Subject is awake, pacing. The child appears to be locked in a back room. We can hear her crying." That crying sound, transmitted through the radio, nearly broke Maria Rodriguez. She covered her mouth to stifle her own sobs, David holding her in the back of Chun's vehicle parked down the road. "Sullivan!" Agent Reeves's voice boomed through a megaphone. "This is the FBI. The cabin is surrounded. Send the child out, and no one needs to get hurt." Silence. Then a window curtain moved slightly. Sullivan's face appeared, pale and wild-eyed. He was trapped, and he knew it. "I want to talk to her parents." Sullivan shouted back, his voice cracking. "I saved her. I saved her from a terrible life. They don't deserve her." "He's delusional," the team psychologist whispered to Reeves. "Classic savior complex. He genuinely believes he's rescuing her." "I don't care what he believes," Reeves said coldly. "I want that child out of there alive." The standoff had begun. Inside that cabin, 3-year-old Emma Rodriguez huddled in a dark closet, hungry, terrified, and crying for her mommy. Outside, an army of law enforcement prepared for every possible scenario. The morning sun rose higher, birds sang in the trees, and time seemed to stop. Sullivan had nowhere to run. But cornered animals were the most dangerous. And everyone knew the next few hours would determine whether Emma came out alive or became another tragic statistic. Officer Thompson looked down at Justice and whispered, "Get ready, boy. She's going to need you." The rescue operation was about to begin. The standoff stretched into its 4th hour. The summer sun blazed overhead, turning the forest into a sweltering pressure cooker. Inside the mobile command unit, Agent Reeves coordinated with the FBI's crisis negotiation unit, while tactical teams maintained their positions around the cabin. Weapons trained on every exit. Robert Sullivan had barricaded himself inside, refusing all demands. Through the cabin's thin walls, they could hear Emma crying a sound that tore at everyone's heart and made Maria Rodriguez physically ill. David had to hold her back from running toward the cabin herself. "Please," Maria begged Agent Reeves. "Let me talk to him. Let me tell him I just want my baby back." "Mrs. Rodriguez, I understand your desperation, but we can't risk escalating his emotional state," Reeves said firmly but gently. "Our negotiator is trained for this." FBI negotiator Marcus Webb had been on the megaphone for hours, trying every technique in his playbook. "Robert, I know you're scared. I know you think you are helping Emma. Let's talk about this. Send her out, and we can discuss what happens next. You don't understand. Sullivan's voice cracked from inside. She needs me. Her parents don't see her potential. I was chosen to protect her. The psychologist monitoring the conversation shook her head. He's completely detached from reality. The longer this goes, the more unpredictable he becomes. At 11:23 a.m., the situation changed. Smoke began seeping from under the cabin door. He's set a fire. A SWAT commander shouted. We need to breach now. Go, go, go. Agent Reeves commanded. The front door exploded inward as tactical teams stormed the cabin. Sullivan stood in the main room, a lighter in his hand, small flames spreading across curtains he doused with cooking oil. His eyes were wild, sweat pouring down his face. Stay back, he screamed. You can't have her. She's mine. Federal agents. Drop the lighter. Get on the ground. But Sullivan turned and ran toward the back room where Emma was locked. Officer Thompson, who'd been positioned at the rear window, saw Sullivan's movement and made a split-second decision. He smashed through the window with Justice at his side. The back room was tiny and dark, smoke already creeping under the door. Emma was huddled in a closet, her small body shaking violently, her voice hoarse from crying. Sullivan lunged for her, but Justice was faster. The German shepherd positioned himself between the terrified child and the man. Teeth bared, a low growl rumbling from his chest. It's okay, sweetheart, Thompson said softly to Emma, even as he kept his weapon trained on Sullivan. I'm a police officer. That's Justice. We're here to take you home to Mommy and Daddy. But Emma was frozen in terror, pressed against the closet wall, her eyes wide and unseeing. She'd been traumatized beyond words. Trapped in darkness for 3 days with a stranger who told her twisted lies about her parents, abandoning her, Sullivan made one final desperate move toward Emma, but Justice lunged, clamping his jaws around Sullivan's arm, not to injure, but to restrain. The man screamed and fell backward. SWAT team members burst through the door, tackled Sullivan, and handcuffed him within seconds. Subject secure. The team leader radioed. We have the child. Thompson holstered his weapon and approached Emma slowly, his hands visible and non-threatening. The smoke was getting thicker, flames spreading in the main room. They had maybe 2 minutes before the whole cabin became an inferno. Emma, honey, we need to leave right now, Thompson said gently. Can you come with me? Emma's eyes were glazed with shock. She didn't move, didn't respond, just stared into nothing. Justice, Thompson commanded softly. Help. The German shepherd immediately softened his posture. He walked slowly to Emma, lowered his head, and gently nuzzled her hand. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, Emma's small fingers moved, barely touching Justice's fur. The dog pressed closer, his warm presence cutting through her terror. Emma's hand suddenly gripped Justice's collar. She didn't look at Thompson, didn't acknowledge the smoke or chaos, but she held onto that dog like he was her lifeline. That's it, sweetheart, Thompson whispered. Justice will keep you safe. Can you hold on tight? Thompson scooped Emma into his arms. She weighed almost nothing, dehydrated and weak, while Justice stayed pressed against them. They ran through the smoke-filled cabin, flames licking at the walls. Other officers had already dragged Sullivan outside, where he was screaming incoherently, blood running from Justice's bite marks. The moment they cleared the cabin door, Emma was surrounded by paramedics. Maria's scream of joy and anguish echoed through the forest as she saw her daughter alive but broken, silent and shaking. David was sobbing openly as they ran toward the ambulance. Emma, baby, it's Mommy. You're safe now. But Emma didn't respond. She stared straight ahead, her hand still gripping Justice's collar so tightly her knuckles were white. The paramedics tried to examine her, but the moment they touched her, she screamed a sound so primal and terrified that everyone froze. "Ma'am, we need to examine your daughter," the lead paramedic said to Maria. "She's severely dehydrated and possibly injured." "Emma, honey, let these nice people help you," Maria pleaded. Tears streaming down her face, Emma screamed louder, thrashing against anyone who came near everyone except Justice. When Officer Thompson held her with Justice pressed close, she went quiet, her eyes still distant, but her body relaxing slightly. "The dog stays with her," Agent Reeves ordered the paramedics. "Whatever she needs, that dog provides it. Understood?" In the ambulance rushing toward the hospital, Emma sat on Maria's lap with Justice's head resting across her legs. She still hadn't spoken a word. She hadn't looked at her parents. She hadn't cried or smiled or shown any recognition. The little girl who disappeared 3 days ago had been found alive, but something vital inside her had been shattered. The doctors at St. Mary's Hospital in Hayward worked quickly. With Justice lying beside the examination table, Emma was severely dehydrated, malnourished, and covered in bruises. But physically, she would recover. Psychologically was another matter entirely. "She's in severe shock," Dr. Rachel Morrison explained to the Rodriguez family. "She experienced significant trauma. Her mind has essentially shut down to protect itself. She needs specialized care, therapy, time. There's no way to predict how long recovery will take." Maria held Emma's limp hand, sobbing quietly. "But she's alive," she whispered. "Thank God she's alive." Outside the hospital room, Officer Thompson sat with Justice, both exhausted. Detective Chun approached with tears in her eyes, the first emotion she'd allowed herself to show in 4 days. "You saved her life," Chun said. Thompson shook his head. "Justice saved her. That dog reached her when none of us could." Behind them, Robert Sullivan was being transferred to federal custody, facing charges of kidnapping, child endangerment, and attempted murder. He was still rambling about saving Emma, completely divorced from reality. But in that hospital room, surrounded by people who truly loved her, Emma Rodriguez began the long journey of healing with a loyal German shepherd named Justice never leaving her side. 3 weeks had passed since Emma's rescue, but the little girl who'd come home wasn't the same child who'd disappeared. The Rodriguez house, once filled with Emma's laughter and constant chatter, had become eerily quiet. Emma sat for hours staring at nothing, her once bright eyes now dull and distant. She hadn't spoken a single word since being found. Dr. Michael Foster, a child trauma specialist with 20 years of experience, visited the Rodriguez home 3 times a week. He was a gentle man in his 60s with kind eyes and endless patience. But even he was concerned by Emma's complete withdrawal from the world. "She's experiencing what we call traumatic mutism," Dr. Foster explained to Maria and David in hushed tones while Emma sat in the next room with Justice, who'd been visiting daily. "Her mind is protecting itself by shutting down communication. She witnessed something during those 3 days, something her young brain can't process. Will she ever talk again?" Maria asked, her voice breaking. She'd asked this question a dozen times, desperate for a different answer. "Most children do recover," Dr. Foster said carefully. "But Emma's case is complicated. Whatever Sullivan did or said to her created a deep psychological wound. She's trapped inside her own mind right now." David clenched his fists, fighting back tears. "That monster. He's in jail, and he's still hurting her every single day." The case against Robert Sullivan should have been straightforward. The evidence was overwhelming: DNA, fingerprints, eyewitness testimony, security footage. He'd been caught literally holding Emma captive. But Sullivan's public defender, had entered an insanity plea, claiming his client was mentally incompetent to stand trial. District Attorney Patricia Williams, a fierce prosecutor known for her work on behalf of victims, sat in her office reviewing the case file with Detective Chun. Williams was a black woman in her 40s who'd grown up in Minneapolis and had dedicated her career to seeking justice for the vulnerable. "The physical evidence is solid," Williams said, tapping her pen against the file. "But Sullivan's lawyer is going to paint him as delusional, not criminally responsible. Without Emma's testimony about what happened in that cabin, we might be looking at a reduced sentence psychiatric facility instead of maximum security prison." Chun's jaw tightened. "That's not justice." "No, it's not," Williams agreed. "But here's the problem. Emma is our only witness to what actually happened during those 3 days. Did he assault her? Did he make threats? Did he tell her things that might indicate he was planning to take other children? We need to know, but we can't traumatize that child further by forcing her to testify. So what do we do?" Williams leaned back in her chair, conflicted. "I've been a prosecutor for 18 years. I've never asked a 3-year-old to testify. The trauma, the pressure, the defense attorney's cross-examination, it could destroy whatever healing she's achieved. But without her, Sullivan might get off with 15 years in a psychiatric hospital instead of life in prison." Over the following weeks, Dr. Foster worked with Emma using play therapy, art therapy, and other nonverbal techniques. Emma would draw sometimes disturbing pictures of dark rooms and shadows, stick figures with no faces, and repeatedly, a large dog that looked like justice. "She's trying to communicate," Dr. Foster told the Rodriguez family. "These drawings are her way of processing the trauma. Look here, she drew herself in a closet, alone. And here a man with angry red marks around his head. She's remembering, but she can't vocalize it yet." Maria studied the drawings with tears in her eyes. Each one was a window into her daughter's nightmare. A nightmare that Maria couldn't protect her from, couldn't erase, couldn't fix. Officer Thompson continued visiting with Justice 3 times a week. It was the only time Emma showed any sign of life. She would bury her face in Justice's fur, her small arms wrapped around the dog's neck. And sometimes, just sometimes, they could hear her whisper to him, words too quiet to make out. "She trusts that dog more than any human right now," Thompson told Chun. "Justice represents safety to her. He was there when we rescued her. In her mind, he's the one who saved her." As Sullivan's trial date approached, District Attorney Williams made a controversial decision. She called a meeting with the Rodriguez family, Dr. Foster, Detective Chun, Officer Thompson, and several child advocacy experts. "I want to try something unprecedented," Williams announced. "I want Emma present in the courtroom during the trial, not to testify directly, but to be there. Studies show that sometimes being in a safe, controlled environment where they can see justice happening helps trauma victims heal. Emma won't be questioned. She'll sit with her parents and Dr. Foster. She can leave at any time." "Absolutely not," Maria said immediately. "You want to put my daughter in the same room as that monster? Are you insane?" "Hear me out," Williams said gently. "Sullivan will be shackled behind a barrier with armed guards. Emma will be surrounded by people who love her. The defense attorney has already objected, calling it emotional manipulation of the jury, but the judge is considering it. Here's my thinking. Emma needs to see that Sullivan has no power over her anymore, that he's the one in chains, not her." David shook his head. "It's too risky. What if it makes her worse?" Dr. Foster spoke up thoughtfully. "Actually, there's therapeutic merit to this approach. Emma is trapped in the moment of her trauma. Seeing Sullivan powerless, seeing justice enacted, might help her brain process that the danger has passed. But only if she feels absolutely safe. That's where I come in, Officer Thompson said. I formally request that Justice be present as Emma's emotional support animal. If she's going to be in that courtroom, Justice should be there with her. Williams nodded. I was hoping you'd say that. I've already filed a motion with the judge. If this happens, Justice would be the first canine officer to serve as a therapy animal in a criminal trial in Minnesota. Maria looked at David, both of them torn. They wanted Sullivan to pay for what he'd done, but not at the cost of their daughter's mental health. What if she has a breakdown? Maria asked. What if seeing him triggers something terrible? Then we leave immediately, Dr. Foster assured her. This is Emma's choice. If at any point she shows distress, we remove her from the situation. But Mrs. Rodriguez, I've been doing this for 2 decades. Sometimes confronting fear in a safe environment is the first step toward healing. A decision weighed heavily on everyone. Emma remained silent, drawing her dark pictures, clinging to Justice during visits, and living in a world inside her own head that no one else could reach. District Attorney Williams filed her motion. The defense objected strenuously. The judge took 2 weeks to consider the unprecedented request. Media coverage intensified, with legal experts debating whether a child so young should be anywhere near a criminal trial. Even as a silent observer, finally, Judge Margaret Thornton made her ruling. Emma Rodriguez could be present in the courtroom under strict conditions. She would sit in the back with her parents, Dr. Foster and Justice. She would not be called to testify. She could leave at any moment. And most importantly, Robert Sullivan would be positioned so that he could not make eye contact with her. The trial was set for September 15th, 2019. As the date approached, Emma remained locked in her silence, a prisoner of memories she couldn't express. But in her drawings, the stick figure of herself began appearing outside the dark closet, standing next to a large dog. Somewhere deep inside, Emma was fighting to come back. The question was whether justice in a courtroom could help set her free. September arrived with cool autumn winds that stripped leaves from the trees. Inside the Hennepin County Courthouse, preparations were underway for what had become one of the most closely watched trials in Minnesota history. Media trucks lined the streets, reporters jockeying for position, while inside, District Attorney Patricia Williams reviewed her case for the 100th time. The evidence against Robert Sullivan was overwhelming, but Williams knew that wasn't enough. Sullivan's defense attorney, a sharp-tongued public defender named Kenneth Marsh, was building an insanity defense that could potentially reduce Sullivan's sentence to psychiatric treatment rather than life imprisonment. Marsh had already lined up 3 psychiatrists ready to testify that Sullivan suffered from delusional disorder and couldn't distinguish right from wrong. He knew enough to hide his tracks, change Emma's clothes, and evade police for days, Williams argued to her team. That's not insanity, that's calculation. Detective Sarah Chun sat in Williams's office, going through witness lists. We've got solid testimony from the truck driver, the forensics team, the FBI agents. But Marsh is going to tear into Sullivan's mental state. He'll paint him as a victim of his own delusions. Which is why I need Emma there, Williams said firmly. The jury needs to see what Sullivan did to a real child, not just hear about it in abstract terms. Meanwhile, at the Rodriguez home, Dr. Michael Foster was working with Emma to prepare her for what might be the most challenging day of her young life. Emma still hadn't spoken a word in the 2 months since her rescue, communicating only through drawings and occasional nods or head shakes. Emma, sweetie, we're going to visit a big room with lots of people, Dr. Foster said gently, showing her photographs of courtrooms to familiarize her. Your mommy and daddy will be there. Justice will be there. And you don't have to do anything except sit quietly. Can you do that? Emma stared at the photographs with wide, fearful eyes. Her small hand reached out to touch an image of a judge's bench, her finger trembling. "The bad man will be there too," Dr. Foster continued, knowing he couldn't lie to her. "But he'll be very far away, and he can't hurt you. Police officers will make sure of that." Emma's breathing quickened. Maria immediately moved closer, wrapping her arms around her daughter. "Baby, you don't have to do this," Maria said, shooting an angry look at Dr. Foster. "We can tell them no." But Emma did something unexpected. She picked up a crayon and her drawing pad. With deliberate strokes, she drew a stick figure behind bars, then drew herself standing outside with a large dog. She pointed at the drawing, then at her chest, then nodded. Dr. Foster's eyes widened. "She wants to go," he said softly. "She wants to see him locked up." David knelt beside Emma, his voice thick with emotion. "Are you sure, Princess? You really want to do this?" Emma nodded again, more firmly this time. Then she drew another picture, a stick figure with a closed mouth and a dark cloud around her head. Next to it, she drew the same figure with the cloud broken into pieces and a small smile. The message was clear. She needed this to break free from her silence. Over the next week, the team worked tirelessly to prepare. Officer Marcus Thompson brought Justice to the courthouse multiple times, letting Emma explore the space when it was empty, helping her become comfortable with the environment. Justice, sensing the importance of his role, was unusually calm and focused during these visits. "Good boy," Thompson whispered, scratching behind Justice's ears. "You're going to help her through this, aren't you?" The courthouse staff made special accommodations. Judge Margaret Thornton, a grandmother herself, ordered a comfortable chair for Emma in the back row, positioned so she wouldn't have direct line of sight to Sullivan unless she chose to look. A private room was prepared where Emma could retreat if she became overwhelmed. Kenneth Marsh, Sullivan's defense attorney, filed motion after motion, trying to prevent Emma's presence. "This is a blatant attempt to manipulate the jury's emotions," he argued before Judge Thornton. "My client is entitled to a fair trial, not a circus where a child is paraded around to generate sympathy." Judge Thornton fixed him with a stern look. "Mr. Marsh, that child is not being paraded anywhere. She is a victim who has the right to observe justice being served. Your objection is noted and overruled." Again. As the trial date approached, Sullivan himself became increasingly agitated in jail. According to guards, he spent hours rocking back and forth, muttering about how Emma would tell them the truth and explain how I saved her. His delusions remained fully intact, making him even more unpredictable. "He genuinely believes he's a hero," the jail psychiatrist reported to Williams. "In his mind, Emma will vindicate him. When she doesn't, I'm concerned about his reaction." "Increase his security," Williams ordered. "I don't want him anywhere near that child, even separated by a courtroom." The weekend before the trial, Maria and David barely slept. Emma had started having nightmares again. They could hear her whimpering in her sleep, though she still wouldn't speak about what she saw in those dreams. Only when Thompson brought Justice for an overnight visit did Emma finally sleep peacefully, curled up with the big German shepherd on her bedroom floor. "That dog is a miracle," Maria whispered to David, watching through the cracked door. "He reaches her when we can't." Thompson, sleeping in the guest room in case Emma needed Justice during the night, felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. He'd been a K-9 officer for 15 years, but he'd never faced anything like this. Justice wasn't just tracking criminals or sniffing for drugs. He was helping heal a shattered soul. On the morning of September 15th, 2019, the Rodriguez family arrived at the courthouse through a private entrance to avoid the media frenzy. Emma wore a blue dress her grandmother had made, her dark curls carefully brushed. She clutched Justice's collar with one hand and held her mother's hand with the other. Inside the courtroom, the gallery was packed. Journalists filled the designated press section. Victim advocates and child safety representatives occupied several rows. And in the front, separated by bulletproof glass and flanked by 4 armed guards, sat Robert Sullivan in an orange jumpsuit and shackles. When Sullivan was led in, his eyes immediately scanned the courtroom, searching. Despite the judge's orders and the strategic positioning, his gaze found Emma in the back row. For one terrible moment, their eyes met. Emma's entire body went rigid. Her breathing stopped. Justice immediately pressed against her legs, and Dr. Foster leaned in close. "You're safe, Emma. He can't reach you." "You're safe." Sullivan's face twisted into what might have been a smile or a grimace. It was impossible to tell. He opened his mouth as if to speak to her, but the guards immediately restrained him, blocking his view. "Mr. Sullivan, you will face forward," Judge Thornton commanded sharply. "Any further attempt to interact with the minor child, and you will be removed from your own trial. Do you understand?" Sullivan nodded slowly, but a strange energy radiated from him. He believed Emma was there to support him, to tell everyone how he'd saved her. His delusion was complete. District Attorney Williams stood, smoothed her suit jacket, and prepared to begin opening statements. This trial would determine whether a monster went to prison for life or spent a few years in psychiatric care before potentially being released. Everything hung in the balance. Emma sat in the back row, silent as always, her hand buried in Justice's fur. Her parents flanked her protectively. Dr. Foster watched her carefully for any signs of distress. And Officer Thompson stood nearby, ready to evacuate her at a moment's notice. "All rise," the bailiff announced. "The state of Minnesota versus Robert James Sullivan is now in session, the Honorable Judge Margaret Thornton presiding." The trial that would change everything was about to begin. And somewhere in the silence of her traumatized mind, 3-year-old Emma Rodriguez held secrets that could either set her free or keep her imprisoned forever. The courtroom felt suffocating despite its high ceilings and large windows. District Attorney Patricia Williams stood before the jury, 12 men and women who held Robert Sullivan's fate in their hands. She began her opening statement with controlled intensity, her voice steady but filled with barely contained emotion. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this is a case about evil disguised as salvation," Williams began, her eyes sweeping across their faces. The defendant, Robert Sullivan, didn't stumble into crime. He planned it. He stalked a 3-year-old child. He watched her play at parks. He photographed her without permission. And on July 4th, 2019, while her family celebrated Independence Day, he stole her freedom and nearly her life. Emma sat in the back row, her small body pressed against Maria's side, her hand gripping Justice's collar. The German shepherd lay perfectly still, his warm presence a constant anchor. Dr. Foster sat on Emma's other side, watching her breathing, her muscle tension. Any sign that she needed to leave, Williams continued, detailing the evidence, the security footage, the fiber evidence, the eyewitness testimony, Sullivan's own apartment filled with photographs of children. She painted a picture of calculation and predation, not mental illness. "The defense will tell you that Mr. Sullivan was delusional, that he didn't know right from wrong," Williams said, her voice rising. "But I will prove to you that he knew exactly what he was doing. He changed Emma's clothes to eliminate evidence. He avoided traffic cameras. He hid in a remote cabin. These are not the actions of someone who can't distinguish reality. These are the actions of a predator who knew he was committing a crime." Kenneth Marsh, Sullivan's defense attorney, rose for his opening statement. He was a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses and a gentle manner that belied his sharp legal mind. "Ladies and gentlemen, my client is a sick man," Marsh began. "Robert Sullivan suffers from severe delusional disorder. He genuinely believed he was saving Emma Rodriguez from harm. This doesn't excuse his actions, but it explains them. This is not a case of evil. This is a case of profound mental illness. Emma's grip on justice tightened. The dog sensed her tension and shifted slightly, pressing more firmly against her legs. Over the next 2 weeks, the prosecution built its case methodically. Detective Sarah Chun testified about the investigation, the manhunt, the evidence trail. Officer Marcus Thompson described the rescue, his voice catching slightly when he recounted finding Emma frozen in terror in that dark closet. "She wouldn't respond to any of us," Thompson testified. "But just as my K-9 partner, he reached her when we couldn't. That dog gave her the courage to leave that cabin." A truck driver, Harold Mitchell, took the stand, describing seeing Emma at the rest stop, how frightened she looked, how Sullivan had yanked her away when she tried to approach other people. Forensic experts presented DNA evidence, fingerprints, and fiber analysis that conclusively placed Sullivan and Emma together. Throughout all of this, Emma sat silently, watching and listening. She didn't react when crime scene photos were displayed. She didn't flinch when Sullivan's voice was played from his police interrogation recording. She simply watched, her face expressionless, her hand never leaving Justice's furred-out Maria, watched her daughter with a breaking heart. This tiny child was sitting through testimony about her own abduction, hearing strangers describe her trauma in clinical terms. "Is this really helping her?" Maria whispered to Dr. Foster during a recess. "Look at her eyes," Dr. Foster whispered back. "She's processing. She's present. Before, she was trapped in that closet mentally. Now she's seeing that Sullivan is the one trapped behind glass, in chains, powerless. This is exactly what she needed." The defense began their case in the trial's 3rd week. Psychiatrist after psychiatrist testified about Sullivan's delusional disorder, his distorted perception of reality, his genuine belief that he was a savior rather than a kidnapper. Sullivan's ex-wife testified tearfully about his declining mental state before their divorce. "He started talking about saving children from the corrupt world," she sobbed on the stand. "I begged him to get help, but he refused. He thought I was part of the conspiracy against him." Then came the moment everyone had been dreading. Kenneth Marsh called his final character witness, a woman named Lisa Brennan, Sullivan's ex-girlfriend from years ago. She was a plain woman in her 40s, with nervous eyes and fidgeting hands. She took the stand and smiled weakly at the jury. "Ms. Brennan, how long did you know Robert Sullivan?" Marsh asked. "About 5 years. We dated for 2 of those years," she replied, her voice soft. "And what was your impression of his character?" "Robert was gentle, kind. He loved children, wanted to protect them. He would never deliberately hurt anyone, especially not a child. He's not evil. He's just ... confused." As Lisa Brennan spoke, something changed in the courtroom's energy. Emma, who had been sitting quietly throughout 2 weeks of testimony, suddenly sat up straighter. Her body went rigid. Her breathing quickened. Justice immediately sensed the shift and raised his head, looking at her with concerned brown eyes. Emma's gaze locked onto Lisa Brennan with laser focus. Her small hand gripped Justice's collar so tightly, her knuckles turned white. A slight tremor ran through her body. Maria noticed immediately. "Emma? Baby, what's wrong?" But Emma didn't respond to her mother. She was staring at Lisa Brennan with an intensity that was frightening in such a young child. Her mouth opened slightly, her breath coming faster. Dr. Foster leaned in close. "Emma, do you need to leave?" "We can go right now." Emma shook her head violently, her eyes never leaving the woman on the witness stand. On the stand, Lisa Brennan continued her testimony. "Robert just needed help, that's all. He needed medication and therapy, not prison. He's a victim of his own mind." And then it happened. Emma stood up, The movement was so sudden that Justice jumped to his feet beside her. The entire courtroom turned to look at the small child standing in the back row. Even Judge Thornton paused, her gavel raised. Emma's arm rose slowly, her tiny finger pointing directly at Lisa Brennan on the witness stand. The courtroom held its collective breath. For 2 months, this child had been completely silent. Now she stood, trembling but determined, her finger pointed like an accusation. Lisa Brennan's face went pale. Her eyes widened as she stared at the little girl pointing at her. Emma's mouth opened. Her voice, unused for so long, came out as a hoarse whisper that somehow carried through the dead-silent courtroom. 2 words. Just 2 words. But they were enough to change everything. Bad lady. The courtroom erupted. Journalists lunged for their phones. The jury leaned forward. Kenneth Marsh jumped to his feet, objecting loudly. But nothing could stop what came next. Emma's voice grew stronger, tears streaming down her face as months of trapped trauma finally found release. Bad lady was there? She cried, her finger still pointing at Lisa Brennan. Bad lady helped. Bad lady took me. Lisa Brennan stood up so fast her chair toppled backward. No, she's lying. She's just a confused child. Order. Judge Thornton's gavel cracked like thunder. Ms. Brennan, sit down. Bailiff. But it was too late. The mask had slipped. Lisa Brennan's face twisted with panic and rage. She was supposed to forget. Brennan shouted. She was 3 years old. She wasn't supposed to remember. Detective Chun was already moving, racing down the aisle. 2 bailiffs grabbed Lisa Brennan as she tried to run from the witness stand. Sullivan, behind his glass barrier, began screaming incoherently, finally understanding that his accomplice had just exposed them both. Emma collapsed into her mother's arms, sobbing not in fear anymore, but in release. Justice pressed against both of them, whining softly. Dr. Foster wrapped his arms around all 3 of them protectively, while chaos erupted around them. Get that woman into custody now. Williams shouted over the pandemonium. And someone read her Miranda rights? Officer Thompson appeared at Emma's side, his eyes wet with tears. You did it, sweetheart, he whispered. You were so brave. You saved yourself. Emma turned her tear-stained face to him and spoke again, her voice small but clear. Justice saved me, she said, hugging the German shepherd's neck. He's my hero. The courtroom slowly came back to order, but everything had changed. Emma Rodriguez had spoken, and with 2 simple words, bad lady, she had exposed a conspiracy that would shock the nation and ensure that both Robert Sullivan and Lisa Brennan would spend the rest of their lives behind bars. The courtroom descended into controlled chaos as bailiffs handcuffed Lisa Brennan, her screams echoing off the marble walls. This is insane. I didn't do anything. That child is confused. But her words rang hollow against Emma's clear, devastating accusation. Judge Thornton ordered an immediate recess, her face stern, but her eyes revealing shock at what had just unfolded. Emma clung to her mother, her small body shaking with sobs, but these were different tears. These weren't the silent, trapped tears of trauma. These were tears of release, of a dam finally breaking after months of pressure. Dr. Foster held her hand while Justice pressed his massive body against her legs, grounding her in the present moment. You're so brave. Baby, Maria whispered over and over, kissing Emma's forehead. So incredibly brave. David wrapped his arms around both of them, his own face wet with tears. For the first time in months, their daughter had spoken. Not just spoken, she had testified, had pointed at evil and named it, had broken through her trauma to tell the truth that no one else knew. Detective Sarah Chun cornered Lisa Brennan in the holding room adjacent to the courtroom. The woman's panic had transformed into cold calculation now that her outburst had damned her. "I want a lawyer," Brennan said flatly. "I'm not saying another word." "You don't need to," Sean replied, her voice like ice. "Emma already said everything we needed to hear. You were there. You helped Sullivan kidnap her. And now we're going to prove it." Within hours, Chun's team executed search warrants on Lisa Brennan's apartment and vehicle. What they found confirmed Emma's accusation and revealed something even more sinister. In Brennan's home office, investigators discovered detailed files on 17 different children names, addresses, school schedules, photographs taken without parental knowledge. Emma Rodriguez had been just the beginning. She was the planner. FBI agent Victoria Reeves explained to District Attorney Williams in an emergency meeting that evening. Sullivan was delusional, but Brennan was calculating. She targeted the Rodriguez family because David's construction company had won a contract that her brother's company lost. This was revenge, pure and simple. And she was grooming Sullivan, using his mental illness to execute her plan. Williams felt sick. She was going to keep doing this. Emma wasn't going to be the last. "No," Reeves confirmed grimly. "Our behavioral analysts believe they were planning at least 3 more abductions." Emma pointing at Brennan today didn't just convict her, it saved other children's lives. Back at the Rodriguez home that evening, Emma sat on the couch between her parents with Justice's head in her lap. She'd spoken several sentences since her courtroom revelation, simple words, but each one a miracle. Her voice was hoarse from disuse, but it was there, breaking through the silence that had imprisoned her. "The bad lady came to the park," Emma said quietly, her small fingers stroking Justice's fur. "She was nice at first. She said Mommy sent her to get me. But then she wasn't nice anymore. She took me to the scary man's car." Maria's hand covered her mouth, stifling a sob. This was the story Emma had been locked inside with. The truth she couldn't verbalize until she saw Lisa Brennan's face in that courtroom. "The scary man said Mommy and Daddy didn't want me anymore," Emma continued, tears sliding down her cheeks. "He said I was bad. But Justice came and showed me they were lying. Justice reminded me that I'm good." Officer Thompson, who'd been invited to dinner, knelt beside Emma. "You are good, sweetheart. You're the bravest person I've ever met. You helped catch the bad people." Emma looked at him with those big brown eyes that had seemed too much for a 3-year-old. "Will they go away forever?" "Yes," Thompson promised. "They'll never hurt you or anyone else again." The trial reconvened 3 days later with a dramatically different landscape. Lisa Brennan faced a separate indictment with charges of kidnapping, conspiracy, child endangerment, and planning multiple abductions. Her lawyer tried to negotiate a plea deal, but Williams refused. Both Brennan and Sullivan would face the maximum penalties. Kenneth Marsh, Sullivan's defense attorney, withdrew the insanity plea after Brennan's arrest. The evidence now showed Sullivan had been manipulated and directed by a calculating partner. While his mental illness was real, it didn't absolve him of responsibility. It made him a dangerous weapon that Brennan had wielded against innocent children. The jury deliberated for only 4 hours. When they returned, the forewoman stood with a grave expression. On the charge of kidnapping in the first degree, we find the defendant, Robert James Sullivan, guilty. On the charge of child endangerment, guilty. On the charge of conspiracy to commit kidnapping, guilty. Sullivan showed no reaction, still lost in his delusional world. But justice had been served. Lisa Brennan's trial followed 2 months later. The evidence against her was overwhelming. Emma's testimony, the files in her apartment, phone records showing she'd been surveilling the Rodriguez family for weeks, financial records proving her revenge motive. She was convicted on all counts and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Robert Sullivan received the same sentence. Judge Thornton, and her sentencing remarks addressed both defendants with barely controlled anger. You preyed on the most innocent among us. You traumatized a child and her family. You planned to destroy more lives. This court ensures you will never have that opportunity again. In the gallery, Maria held Emma close while David wiped away tears of relief. Justice sat at Emma's feet, forever her guardian and the hero who'd helped her find her voice again. 6 months after the trial, Emma started preschool. She still had nightmares sometimes, still needed therapy weekly with Dr. Foster, still had moments when the trauma resurfaced. But she was talking, laughing, playing slowly, becoming herself again. Officer Thompson and Justice visited every week, their bond with Emma unbreakable. The Minnesota Police Department honored Justice with a special commendation, the first K-9 officer to receive recognition for therapeutic support in a criminal trial. His story inspired police departments across the country to train therapy dogs for working with traumatized children. Emma's case led to significant legal reforms. Minnesota became the first state to pass Emma's Law, which established protocols for using therapy animals in courtrooms and created additional protections for child witnesses in trauma cases. Other states quickly followed suit. On a warm spring day in 2020, the Rodriguez family visited Officer Thompson at the police station for Justice's retirement ceremony. The brave German Shepherd, now nearly 7 years old, was retiring from active duty. But his retirement wouldn't be restful. He was going to live with the Rodriguez family as Emma's permanent companion and service dog. Justice belongs with Emma, Thompson said, tears in his eyes as he handed the leash to the little girl who'd captured his heart. He's always been hers. Emma threw her arms around Justice's neck, her face buried in his fur. I love you, Justice, she said clearly. You saved me when I was scared. Now I'll take care of you forever. The room erupted in applause. Cameras flashed. But in that moment, it was just a little girl and her dog too. Souls who'd found each other in the darkest moment and had helped each other heal. Years later, Emma Rodriguez would grow up to become a child advocate, working to help other trauma survivors find their voices. She would speak at conferences, testify before Congress about child safety legislation, and dedicate her life to ensuring no child suffered what she had endured. But she would always say the same thing when asked about her recovery. I found my voice in a courtroom, but I found my courage from a dog named Justice. He taught me that even when bad things happen, there are still heroes who will fight for you. And sometimes, the best heroes have 4 legs and a loyal heart. The story of the 3-year-old who pointed at a police dog and said 2 words that changed. Everything became a testament to resilience, courage, and the unbreakable bond between a traumatized child and the dog who saved her life. Emma Rodriguez had been stolen, silenced, and traumatized. But she had also been found, freed, and given a voice that would echo through the halls of justice for generations to come. And Justice, the German Shepherd who'd been there when she needed him most, lived out his days surrounded by love, treats, and the endless gratitude of a family he'd helped save. The end.